Chapter 1154 just dropped a bombshell. Gol D Xebec is Blackbeard's father. But beyond just explaining why Blackbeard is so obsessed with rocks, the reveal reframes everything we knew about the Ace versus Blackbeard fight, which is arguably the biggest trigger in the entire series. We have Ace, Roger's son, who clashed with Blackbeard, Rox's son. If that's not fate in a key series event from nearly 20 years ago where the kids repeated their father's rap beef, then I don't know what is. I mean, shit, Gaimon might as well be Emu. I need to get a lot out of my chest about why this is so central to the themes of the series and how it further proves why Luffy is him, why he's truly the main character in the first place. Let's get into it. Let's start with the basics. Ace and Blackbeard weren't just enemies, they were crewmates, technically brothers, if you want to call them that, I guess, who sailed under the same flag by the same father figure, Whitebeard. And yet, their entire dynamic collapsed under the weight of one moment. Blackbeard killing Thatch to steal the Yami Yami no Mi, which pissed off Ace so much that he went after him. Fast forward to Bonaro Island, where the Clash of the Millennium took place, triggering the chain of events that led to Marineford, Whitebeard's death, Ace's death, and ultimately the time skip allowing Luffy to train. But what if all that wasn't just the result of Blackbeard's betrayal? What if it was a cycle, something inherited in a cosmic sort of way? Now that chapter 1154 confirms Blackbeard is Rox's son, and knowing that Ace is Roger's son, we're dealing with more than just a personal beef. We're looking at a replay of God Valley. Roger versus Rox, Ace versus Blackbeard. Same bloodlines, same ideologies, whether Ace wants to admit it or not, same breaking point. But here's the thing, Rox didn't just lose to Roger, he lost to Roger and Garp together. To me, it means the world government / Marines' influence in the matter ensured that neither pirate's idea of freedom could claim victory. So yeah, the battle at God Valley ended, but the real philosophical conflict, that might have just been postponed and pushed off to the next generation. In other words, their sons. Meaning Ace versus Blackbeard was history's way of saying, we're doing this shit all over again, but the aftermath is just really super depressing. Now here's where things get really tricky, because if this were just another basic, father-son generational beef, that'd be whatever. But this is the kind of setup Oda loves to recontextualize, not just to deepen themes like Inherited Will, but to force us to re-examine the past itself. In this case, the parallels between Roger and Rox and Ace and Blackbeard might hint at something deeper, maybe even a shared childhood, because if Ace and Teach were brothers under Whitebeard, then what if Roger and Rox were raised as siblings under a father figure like Whitebeard? I mean, it's a really interesting idea. Maybe from a meta angle, Oda positioned Whitebeard to represent someone we haven't seen yet symbolically, someone whom Roger and Rox looked up to as a mentor or father figure, similar to what Ace and Blackbeard did for Whitebeard. Although with Blackbeard, it's questionable since he was a piece of shit from the jump. Now, Whitebeard didn't bring Ace and Blackbeard aboard with some grand plan. They came through entirely different circumstances for different reasons, and I doubt that Whitebeard fully knew that Rox was Blackbeard's father. Maybe an inkling, like a vibe, I could somewhat buy that, but basically this crew dynamic might be at its core a story about a cycle of brothers breaking apart and passing down their beliefs. And if you step back, this type of friction is something we've seen many times in One Piece, where two close characters, whether siblings or friends, are raised under the same system but end up on very different paths. The best example right now, as we're in the middle of the Elbaf arc, is Hiruden and Loki. Other great examples include Doflamingo and Corazon, and even Frankie and Iceberg. They're pretty much like brothers. Another great example is you liking the video and subscribing to the channel if you're enjoying this discussion. And last but not least, Luffy and Ace. They had a healthy relationship, but they still ended up on different paths. Luffy became the captain of his own crew, while Ace chose to stay under Whitebeard as a subordinate. And so based on that pattern, I wouldn't be surprised if one of Whitebeard's roles in the story is to serve as a parallel to someone who could hypothetically be the father figure to Rox and Roger, raising them as siblings, passing on his ideology and philosophy, and having Roger and Rox share a vision that eventually fractured. Which brings us to Roger's Jolly Roger, because at this point, I'm pretty sure a lot of you guys have noticed that something is kind of weird about Roger's Jolly Roger. Like, yeah, it's the classic skull and crossbones, but here's the thing. Most of the time, Jolly Roger symbolizes an aspect of the captain, right? Why does Roger's Jolly Roger have a giant blonde mustache? Which, by the way, Roger's mustache is black, so I'm thinking that just like how Ace's Whitebeard tattoo symbolizes his pride because Whitebeard is his father figure, what if the Jolly Roger of the Roger Pirates also represents both his and Rox's father figure? And maybe Roger was inspired by that very father figure to grow his impressive mustache. I'm willing to bet that because of the blonde mustache on Roger's Jolly Roger, his father figure could be Rouge's father since, I don't know, she's blonde. In a way, it's like Roger passing down the straw hat to Shanks, who then passes it to Luffy. So Roger with the mustache and Ace with the Whitebeard tattoo, it's like taking the family recipe but adding your own secret sauce to it. And maybe that same logic applies to Blackbeard. I mean, think about the name Blackbeard. It's a loaded name because, sure, yeah, he has that magnificent beard of all beards, but he wasn't looking like that the first time we saw him. So what if he adopted the name Blackbeard as a deliberate inversion of Whitebeard in a mocking way? That he's the one who will succeed him by going against everything Whitebeard stood for, which he unfortunately did after Marineford. It would fit his whole MO, stealing powers and exploiting the system. Think of every evil thing you could think of, and Blackbeard's probably thinking about doing it. But anyway, Oda's making a point about cycles and parallels within each generation. Like, we're used to this at this point, which means eventually that cycle's gotta stop, right? I wonder whose job that's gonna be. Luffy. It's Luffy, duh. But why does it have to be Luffy? Well, here's the thing. Luffy isn't just the next in line to become the Pirate King. He's a true narrative anomaly. He's not inheriting the world's problems only to reinvent them with a fresh coat of paint. Oda has written Luffy to reject the entire blueprint of these harmful generational cycles, ideology, oppression, and revenge, where each new generation takes on the struggles of the one before it. That's why Luffy doesn't carry hate just because someone else did it. The man simply doesn't give a fuck. He deals with the present and just moves on. He also doesn't try to rule anything. His dream isn't about being king in the traditional sense. It's about freedom, complete, unapologetic, untaxed freedom. That's what he offers to people wherever he goes. It's also why he's so dangerous to the world government, which is obsessed with order and erasing history to maintain the current power structure. He even turned down Rayleigh's offer to reveal the One Piece's location because he wants his adventures to stay his own, showing his willingness to reject fixed paths or fate. That's why Luffy matters in a story built on inherited will and repeated cycles. He is here to break the chain. He's melting it down and turning that bitch into Naruto swing set. But here's where it gets interesting. So if Roger and Rox represent two conflicting ideologies, one about the freedom to inspire people and go adventuring, especially since time was running out for the dude with this pirate brand of cancer, and the other about the freedom to basically prank call your local bartender asking for a guy named Hugh Janus, just pure unadulterated chaos, then Luffy doesn't just inherit Roger's will, he subverts both. He's not interested in becoming a new Roger or an anti-Rox. He doesn't even know who Rox is. He's entering this generational war with no reference for the past, just a reflexive need to free whoever's trapped and caged in the present. You'll never catch Luffy talking about carrying the torch. More like the torch sees him coming and jumps into his hand on its own. And somehow, that's precisely what makes him qualified to lead this world into a new era, into a new dawn. And funny enough, it's a major thematic message in the first arc after the time skip, the Fisherman Island arc. So that's very poetic. That's why the cycle ends. It won't just be with the final war between two reincarnated ideologies. It'll be with Luffy doing what no one else in the story had the guts to do. Choose joy over vengeance, choose the present over the past, choosing freedom over fate. And that's where Luffy versus Blackbeard comes in, because if you've watched my videos for a while, you should be familiar with my take on Luffy's final opponent for the series being Blackbeard rather than Emu, which I talk a lot about in this video here. Because if Luffy is the one who will break the cycle, it makes sense for Blackbeard as the perfect foil to Luffy to be the one trying to reinforce it, weaponize it to assert his own power and status as the dominant figure in the world, and to plunge it completely into eternal darkness. Since he's following in the footsteps of his father, Rox, he's not living his own story. From our perspective, he's just hijacking his father's story. Though it's not on the same level as Emu hijacking Gunko into an actual demon, which I talk about in this video here. Just know if I dish you, I miss you.
know that I hit you like I'm on your ID. I'm aiming the album to fall off, it's pretty ironic.